Okay. Right. So thank you for joining us at our third webinar in the series. My name's Jo Holmes. I run an organisation called Genie, which is greening the economy of the northeast of England. This webinar, we're looking at managing your environment, which is basically looking at environmental management systems. We've got some funding from Gateshead Council to look at how we can assist organisations and businesses across Gateshead and the Gateshead Council supply chain to reduce their environmental impacts. So we've done some awareness raising webinars, this being the third one, and we will be doing one-to-one support that you can book in for an hour or half an hour session, and we can look at your unique organisation and really tailor any support that you might need. So what I'm going to cover here is, and I apologize I can't see you, but so I was going to try and make this a little bit more interactive. So I was going to ask you what you think, what is your understanding of what is sustainability?
Is it like managing? Oh, I don't know. Like managing your impact kind of thing.
Yeah. So basically, the principle of sustainability came out in about before you two were born in the 1980s when I was doing my. We'd studied it when I did my first degree. So
Jo, it says there's somebody waiting to join. It's got a little notification at the top.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I can't. You should be able to see both, shouldn't you? Thank you. So, sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it's all about trying to live within our means and the planet's means, which we haven't been doing, but certainly in more developed countries for the last 30 or 40 years, which is why we're in the current climate crisis that we're in. So why now? So you will have all seen climate change up close and personal, especially we had recent storms, we've had major weather events across the world, we've had more flooding, we've had more forest fires. So we're all being much more aware in our daily lives of what climate change is. The financial markets are starting to look at this now and are moving away from supporting oil and gas industry, for example, or when you apply for funding or for a loan, they're looking at your environmental credentials much more closely, much more than they ever have before. It's much higher up the political agenda. We've just had the COP26 in Glasgow, which was all the world leaders came together to try and look at how we might impact on climate change. There's a lot of local action happening. My organisation, for example, a lot of the local authorities have declared a climate emergency and are doing all sorts of things to try and mitigate that risk and prepare to adapt. Is that somebody else? Sorry, Emily. So yes, there's lots of local action happening, and insurance and risk management is becoming much more up their agenda. Obviously, insurance companies are going to be less and less able to pay out on these big weather events. There are organisations on the Team Valley now, for example, that can't get flood insurance. So it's much higher up everybody's agenda. We covered this in our earlier climate change webinar, but this is looking at some of the evidence behind what's happening, and the world, unfortunately, is getting warmer. So one of the principles we look at is One Planet Living, and that is looking at the 10 themes which are listed there of what your organisation can look at, and you personally as well. So just out of interest, so one of the principles of this is if everybody on the planet lived like we do in the West, how many planets do you think it would need to sustain that life? That's a question for you.
So if everybody lived like us,
so if everybody lived like us in the UK, for example, on the planet, how many planets do you think we would need to resource that?
I can't remember the number, Joe, but I know it's a lot. It might be 50 something, or it might be a lot more.
Yeah, no, it's not. No. So if everybody on the planet lived like we do in the West, we would need 3 planets. We'd need 3 planets to have enough resource. But if everybody lived like they do in America, for example, then we would need 5 planets to sustain that life. So basically, that's a really good demonstration of how we're all living beyond what our planet can sustain in terms of resource use, water, energy, everything. So why is it important to look at your environmental performance as an organisation and as an individual? The world's population is only getting bigger. We're having to sustain more lives. There's a greater demand for food, energy, water, and we've only got finite resources. And when we looked at our climate change model on our first webinar, it showed that great swathes of the planet will not be able to sustain life. And if the population is growing, what are they going to eat? Where are they going to live? What are they going to drink? So it's really important that we all do something right now. So when we look at environmental sustainability in terms of your organisations, we want to look at what are the benefits to do something. And one of that is you'd start looking at your business and your organisations through a different lens, through a green lens. So it gives you a fresh perspective. A lot of organisations, you'll know this, when you start a new job, you go in and a lot of organisations do things because it's always been done that way. And they're sort of blinkered, they don't see that there is a new way of doing something. So when you start looking at your environmental performance, you can look at processes, buying, purchasing, everything that you do. And if you start looking at it through a different lens, you can see some real cost savings and some really good environmental impact reductions. You start looking at resource use in a different way. So you start looking at your heating, your processes, the machinery you use. Can you turn printers and laptops off at night? You just start looking at the things that you're doing on a daily basis and can you do them better? You can get better staff engagement. You've got a really good positive story to tell. I mentioned before about risk, but you're really future-proofing your businesses, especially with the world and how it's changing in terms of climate activities, flooding, but also a lot of younger people now want to work for a greener organisation, so you can attract better staff if you are managing your environmental impacts. So one of the tools you can use to do that within your organisation is an environmental management system. And as with any management system, it's just a structured framework for your organisation to manage its environmental impacts. It shows leadership through your environmental policy. It helps you to plan, measure, and reduce your resource use. It helps you set targets, support the organisation, stakeholders, customers, and clients. It helps you produce action plans and change some of your operational activities. Evaluate your performance, monitor what you're doing, regularly audit what you're doing so you can see how well your system's being used. And the overall aim is that you go for continual improvement. So I deliver Investors in the Environment, which is a nationally accredited environmental management system. And we deliver that throughout the Northeast, but it's a national system. The reason I love Investors in the Environment is it's really adaptable to any size of organisation. So we have micro organisations who are in a managed workspace, with a few employees, and we work with local authorities and NHS trusts. So it can go from a really small organisation right up to a big one. It's about adapting it to your business and getting out of it what you want as an organisation, not about producing a great big folder and a management plan that sits on a shelf and nobody looks at. It supports your organisation throughout your green journey. It helps you measure your carbon footprint and see where you are and get a baseline and then go on to improve. It's founded by PECT, which is an environmental charity in Peterborough. So it's really reasonably priced because it was developed by a charity to help smaller companies look at their environmental impacts. A lot of the other accreditation systems are a bit priced for a big manufacturing chemical plant, for example. And we hold the brand in the Northeast. So it's a staged approach, as all environmental management systems are, and there are 5 main steps to your accreditation process. The first one is to produce your environmental policy. Your section 2 is to measure your resource use. And depending on which one you go, we recommend you start at bronze and then you work through to silver and then green. And that depends on what sort of resources that you would measure. Then you want to set targets and performance. You produce an action plan. That's who does what, by when. You do additional actions. So we recommend that you look at recycling systems and travel plans. You do additional environmental projects, which I'll come on to, and then you report on your progress, communicate what you've done, and it finishes in an environmental audit. And then that is, once you've gone through that process, that's your environmental management system. And you would work on that year in year. And as I said before, the aim of this is continual improvement. So we recommend you set a minimum target of 2% reduction across all your resources. But it depends on what sort of targets that you're setting yourself. So step 1, your environmental policy. So the next webinar, I did aim to do something a bit more practical. So I would go into how you would write an environmental policy, how you would set your targets and things like that. So this is just really an overview of what all the different stages are. But your environmental policy, it really drives your environmental management system, and it's got to be signed off and bought into by senior management. And this can look at anything. So one of your statements in your policy, for example, could be we want to be carbon neutral by 2030. A lot of organisations are going down that route, or net zero. So you would set that out in your policy if that is one of your major aims. So it's a statement of how your company views the environment. So sets out the company or the organisation's intent to reduce your carbon footprint or your recycling, or the amount of waste you produce. And also it ensures that you in your policy, it's good practice to say that you will comply with environmental legislation and regulation. And it helps you clearly communicate that with your employees, but also your customers and suppliers. So Newcastle NHS Trust, for example, have set, they have a carbon neutral or a net zero target by 2030, and they have stated that they won't buy anything from any supplier from 2030 who doesn't have a net zero target. And they're looking to bring that down to 2025. So that is in their environmental policy, and it filters down through every department within the hospital trust. So step 2, you go on to measuring your resources. So you would look at your gas, electric, water. You could look at your paper usage if you're an office, your ink usage. If you're a manufacturer, you could look at chemical usage, or all your inputs and outputs, basically. And the main principle of this is you really can't manage what you don't measure. So if you don't know what your carbon footprint is, if you don't have a baseline of that, then you can't set a target of net zero or carbon neutral until you know that baseline data. This also explains everything that you're going to do. So if you do set a 2% target, for example, you've got this baseline data, it does align quite a lot with your accounts department. And it's good practice to read your meters every month. It helps you identify leaks, for example. I know an organisation didn't realise until they started doing this process that they'd had a water leak for 2 years and they were paying through the nose, but a lot of organisations just pay the bills. They don't really look at them. They don't start measuring them or noticing big dips and big differences. When you start looking at and measuring your usage, for example, and you see a big spike, but you can't account for that, then it gives you the tools to go in and investigate why that's happened. And you can see there might be a faulty machinery, for example, or a water leak or something like that. So you do need your baseline year for whatever it is you're measuring, but particularly when you're looking at your carbon footprint, we do recommend that if your organisation behaved extremely differently during COVID, that you wouldn't use that as your baseline, because it wouldn't be a good reflection of any savings or any increases, really. We recommend you do meter readings monthly. Some organisations don't have access to the meter because they're in a shared workspace, but you can still go through this process without doing that. But it's really important that your data is accurate and up to date. This is just showing you all the other different things that you can measure, all the different resources. But again, it really just depends on what your organisation does and what the resources it uses. A lot of organisations would measure things like staff commute data, or they could measure if they've got any fleet vehicles, they could measure the amount of mileage or diesel or petrol consumed. Any waste products coming from the process, and is there any opportunities to reduce that waste? Anything that you measure, you can manage. So step 3, you would look at setting targets. We always recommend that you use SMART targets. So it's SMART targets are specific. So you are specific about what it is that that your targets are. Measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So when you will do them, by who, all that sort of thing. We do recommend across all levels that you have a 2% reduction target. But again, this is really adaptable to your business. If your target, for example, is to be carbon neutral by a set date, then you would look at what your baseline is, and then you would have to go forward and see what your reduction targets would need to be year on year to reach that end big target, if you see what I mean. So again, these are really adaptable. It depends on what your business does. It depends on what your overall target is. But yeah, we do recommend that you do a minimum of 2%. Step 4 is your action plan. So that is saying what you're going to do to achieve your targets, and by who and by when. So it's to plan out all your actions and activities, how you're going to introduce them, how you're going to monitor them, how you're going to show improvement, and how you're going to reduce your impact. So this really is the key to your environmental management system. It really does. It sets out how you're going to do everything. And this is a real working document, so it can change on a weekly basis, daily basis, but it is the heart of your environmental management system. And in the additional actions, you also look at, you can implement a recycling system, and we also recommend you look at a travel plan, because travel is quite a big part of a lot of organisations. So what we set is continual improvement targets. So it's to try and get all organisations to continually improve year on year. So whatever target you set depends on the overall aim of your organisation, but if you can evidence that you are continually striving, we don't, when we come in and audit an organisation, if they haven't reached that 2% target, or they haven't reached the target they've set themselves, it's not an automatic fail, because you're being audited on the overall system in place. But it's about showing that you're doing everything you can to put in changes, to educate your staff, to look at where the wastages are, do as much as you can to continually improve your organisation. So your additional actions, you can look at a recycling system. Waste is an issue for a lot of organisations. You can look at travel plan, and you can calculate your carbon footprint. So recycling systems. So do any of you already have a recycling system in your organisation?
No, nothing.
I think our bin gets sorted through. I'm sure Premier Waste is a recycling. They take it to a centre and sort through it all. So
Yeah, but you don't have anything in your organisation.
no.
No, we don't even recycle like paper.
Right. Okay.
Just all goes in general waste, and then all the cleaner empties the bins. That's it.
Okay. And so I'm assuming from that, has anybody carried out a waste audit?
No,
Not that I know of, no.
aware.
No. Right. So when you carry out a waste audit, you would go through, basically you go through your bins and you see what's there, and you see how much of what is there. And then that helps you look at opportunities to put in a recycling system or waste reduction system, for example. So if the majority of your bin is paper, but that's easily recyclable, you could segregate that and set up a recycling system. If the majority of your waste is plastic offcuts, for example, you could look at the amount of plastic offcuts, and when you start measuring them, you can see, well, there's more of that in June than there was in February. Why is that? And then you can look at why are there so many plastic offcuts, for example, and it could be the measuring the sheets wrong and the cutting the sheets wrong, or they just could be all different connotations. But when you start really drilling down into what your waste is, it's really, I mean, I'm a bit of a nerd of it, but I find it quite interesting. But when you start looking at segregating and putting in a recycling system within your business, it can save you an awful lot of money as well, because waste companies, when they just collect one big skip, you're getting one big price to collect your waste. Whereas if you segregate it, there is a cost benefit. I think, Amy, I think you do recycle cardboard, don't you?
Well,
you've got a cardboard compactor, haven't you?
Well, yeah, but they said that, I asked the other day, because when I booked onto this, and they don't do it anymore.
Oh, okay. All right. So, well, right. Okay. So we need to look at that when I come and speak to you. But
Yeah.
one of the things you can look at is, so for example, if you've got a great big amount of cardboard waste, for example, segregating it, and I know you did invest in a compactor and baling it, there's a value to that. You can sell that product. Waste metal, for example, there's a value to that. You can there's scrap metal value to that. So you can make cost savings by not wasting it in the first place. There is this thing called the waste hierarchy, and the best thing to do is to eliminate the waste entirely before it's even produced. And then you would look at reducing it as much as you can. And then if you can't reduce it, you would look to recycle as much as you can. And anything that you can't do that, then unfortunately you've got to dispose of. But it's doing that in the best way possible. And you need to make sure you adhere to duty of care legislation. So you need to make sure that you have a licensed waste carrier who takes your waste away. But there's a lot of stuff you can do around your waste, and a waste audit is a really good tool to use when you're looking at what you produce and what you do with it and how you can reduce it. Yeah, so I don't need to read those out to you, but it's a really valuable tool, and it's something that we would certainly recommend every organisation, however small, does, because you'd be really fascinated of what comes out in your bin and what it tells you about your organisation, and what it tells you about different departments within your organisation as well. So travel plans. Travel plans are important because a lot of your carbon output comes from transport. So travel plans can come from, your employees, it can come from, if you do deliveries, it can come from route optimization, it can come from international travel, business trips, all that sort of thing. So it's your long-term strategy for managing access to an organisational site and the travel demands of the people using it. COVID's done an awful lot for this, actually, because the fact that we're having this webinar here now, 2 years ago this wouldn't have happened. We'd be sat in a room together. A lot of meetings, I do so many meetings now online. I wouldn't even think of jumping in the car and going to meet with somebody when I can just do it online. But it's looking at, when you do have to travel, can you go by rail? It's a much lower carbon output. Can you avoid flying wherever possible? Do you need to go on those particular business trips? Can you encourage employees to car share? Can you encourage them to use public transport? Can you encourage them to walk, cycle? It's just about looking at the way your organisation and your people move around, get to the place of work. What are the options available to them? Some organisations now are putting in electric car points, so that it's encouraging staff to buy electric cars or to go down the electric car route, because that's available at work. They can plug them in. So what do they typically include? So incentives and promotions to encourage walking, cycling, public transport and car sharing. Improvement of facilities, that was one point. Putting showers at work can be a big incentive, because if people have a long cycle ride in, for example, they want somewhere to get changed before work starts. Car park management is an issue. Flexible home working, I mean, again, COVID's had a big impact on this. What's one of the positive things that has come out of the pandemic is the way people now are just accepting flexible working, home working as an option, video conferencing, Teams, Zoom, all of that sort of thing has been a big impact. Communication's a really big thing, actually, because you can have the best environmental management system, and it can be doing great things for a management team, but if your staff don't know about it and your customers don't know about it, then you're missing a trick. Your staff really are the people who are going to be implementing it, so it's really important to engage them and get them on board. You can have a fantastic recycling system in your organisation, but if people just put stuff in any bin because they don't really understand it and they don't get the colour coding and we can't really be bothered because they're not really engaged, then it's not going to work for you. So communication really will be key, and that's about I know, Alice, we were talking about some people in your organisation don't even think climate change is happening. So there's going to be a big job there but that will be about communication and getting them on board, and also looking at what motivates them to do it. And often it might not be the environmental message. It might be that the bonus will be bigger because the organisation will make more profit because you're wasting less or something like that. But finding whatever is somebody's key motivator and communicating your message and what the organisation is doing and why it's doing it is often really important when you're doing this sort of work. So there's loads of different ways you can communicate. Monthly reports and annual reports. A lot of organisations, particularly bigger ones, do an annual environmental report, and that's a way of the company letting their employees, stakeholders, customers, etc., know what their intention was with their environmental management system, what their targets were, what they achieved, what the ethos and the values of the company are. Emails and newsletters are quite good communication tool, particularly for bigger organisations. Quarterly or annual presentations, team talks or team meetings. At the beginning and the end of any new green scheme or project, meeting minutes, notice boards. It's nice, actually. One of the things that investors in the environment do is you have to do additional environmental projects. And some of the things that some organisations are doing is things like work picnics, but they're doing vegan work picnics or vegetarian work picnics. Or we produce, as investors in the environment, we have an annual calendar of events. But it's things like National Cycle to Work Week or National Reduce Water Waste Month or whatever, all stuff. But it's all stuff that your organisation can tag on to and use as internal communications. It's just anything you can use to incentivise management team, staff, anybody to do what it is you're asking them to do. Another big issue with communication is a lot of organisations now who are measuring their carbon footprints have seen, this is another Newcastle Hospital Trust. I'm working with them at the minute, so they're just in the front of my mind, but they've recognised that 60% of their carbon footprint is actually their supply chain. So it's within their they've got the incentive to help communicate amongst their supply chain and to get their supply chain's information off them. Because without measuring their supply chain's carbon footprint, they haven't really got a whole picture of their own carbon footprint. So it's difficult for them to reach the targets that they're going for. So they've done all sorts of things with their supply chain, and they've done online events and newsletters and things like that, just to try and get them engaged and to try and get them to supply the information they're after. And an awful lot of other organisations are going to be going down the same route. I know Gateshead Council have declared a climate emergency, as many other local authorities in the region have, and they are measuring their carbon footprints, but they'll be the same. Their supply chain will be a great big section of their overall carbon footprint, so they will be asking. They've signed up for a Smart Carbon spoke at our earlier events, and they've got a really good online platform of how you can measure your individual organisation's carbon footprint, but they also have a platform where your supply chain can input their data as well, so it gives you a better picture of what your organisation's whole carbon footprint would be. So communication really it's really key on what you're doing. So continual improvement, I was saying, it's the whole point of having an environmental management system, is that you are continually improving what you're doing. So you have a periodic review of data. You recycle the system. So you just go back to the start each year and see, and you go through all your processes, and you can add to it and it becomes better and better the more you use it. But if you keep revisiting it and you keep going over processes and you keep engaging different staff, because they can give you some really good ideas that you wouldn't have thought of, it's just improving year on year. The vision and sustainability strategy is key, but that is a driver through your environmental policy. So I know a lot of people, when asked in the past, if they were asked by a customer, well, can you provide an environmental policy? Quite a few have admitted they've just gone online and copied and pasted somebody else's, which is fine to give you a structure and an idea of what you should include, but it's really got to come from your organisation. It's got to be authentic to you and individual to you, and cover what your aims and objectives are. So we have template policies, for example, when you go through investors environment, but it's really important that your individual organisation's drivers and targets and aspirations are part of your policy. You need to analyse and evaluate, action review, target set, and communication is key. I went over that. So that's all I've got to say about environmental management systems. But what I would like to do, I just want to go over there again. We have got one-to-one support, and I know I am going to book in with a few of you on this call today and go over how we can help your business. But I just wanted to get a flavour from you about your feelings about environmental management systems and how they would work with your organisations, and how you feel communication could be implemented.
I think with ours, definitely looking at the waste levels, and having a waste audit would, because we use so much paper and stuff like that doesn't, reducing it all down, but also having a facility to recycle it and stuff like that, putting that would make a difference for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it is one of those things again where when you start looking at it through a green lens, you can see different things. So like waste, for example, but you just said the other day about you've all got these space heaters in the office.
Yeah.
Something like that. If you looked, especially now with energy prices going through the roof, if you looked at that through this sort of lens, it's just a nonsense that that's happening. So it could make a case for investment for different heating systems or something like that. What about you, Amy?
I think the main thing is
right, yes. Oh, sorry, I thought I misheard.
Oh, sorry, Emily. Go on, Amy.
Just recycling, I think, is the
similar names. I'm sorry, and in my hearing. So
it's all right.
Sorry, Emily.
I think recycling is just the main thing. Like we waste so much paper.
Do you, as an organisation, do you turn your computers and printers off every night?
I
No.
turn my computer off, but I know a lot of people don't.
I know a lot of people that don't.
Okay. What about you, Emily?
Right, that's me now. Right. As you know, I said last week we're in this funny position where we rent from, because we're at the stadium, so we rent from the council. So a lot of this, I would hope, is already taken care of. However, I didn't note a few things. I'm not sure if this is all to do with what you've just asked, but we have actually sort of developed a way of working where we support lots of causes. So I see this as being another one. We haven't done it yet, but we have Her Game too, and show racism, the red card, and that sort of thing. So it could be introduced. The problem I see for us is, I did write down a pound sign with a question mark, because we're a charity ourselves, run by volunteers. The trustees are all volunteers. So I don't know how that would work. Again, I would say we would need people like the charity commissioners and the FA to actually direct and instruct us that we have to do this, and to, if necessary, make the money available if we needed it. So I know it's a different situation, but I mean, it's worth thinking about, because you will need to reach charities and community centres. Again, they don't have much money. The other things I jotted down, I'll leave till extra questions at the end, because I think I've answered your questions. Obviously, the supply chain is something we could look at, but we're going to have to work out how we can do it. We need to be told to do it. I don't know if I could persuade the other trustees, apart from the two vegans, that this is necessary to do at the moment. So there would have to be a directive. I mean, also the council should also ask all of its tenants to do it as well. Sorry. Okay, I think that's
right.
it.
Well,
yeah.
One thing to come back on with that is we'll hopefully find out tomorrow if I'm partnered in a bid through the lottery fund, and if we get the green light about that, then there will be funded places for charities to go through investors in the environment. So I'll keep you posted. It could be that you that could be funded, so that would be good.
That's good. At least the money would be there. But I'm afraid we still need to be directed. I also noted that we're going to have to add this to our policies. We're going to have to make sure that it's covered by our constitution. That shouldn't be a problem, because we just go ahead and do things like Her Game 2 and show racism, the red card. We include all of that support stuff we do for various organizations. So, but you know, not necessarily easy to persuade people, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it is getting, I have to say, I've never known it. I've never known the appetite for this. Not that numbers today suggest this, but I have never known the appetite for environmental improvements so high, because of all the drivers and because of climate change, and the political will behind it. And I mean, you saw the presentation, the first presentation on climate change, which I will put the recording of on our website, but we just really don't have time not to act. And also what I would say is, don't wait to be directed, just we all just have to get on with it and do something. So and you just need a green champion within your organization, I would say. So Alice and Amy and Emily, like that could be you guys, like you push for change and you say, and it's all about, most of it is cost saving. It's you will be saving money. Maybe not so much in a managed workspace where the council pays, but certainly for businesses, for sure. So what would be, just out of interest, what would be your barriers, do you think?
Persuading people. I don't know if you know Connected Voice in Newcastle. They started acting on the climate change. It was before COVID, and I did attend their first meeting, and I reported back to my trustees, and there was a very negative response. I mean, this is something I was going to ask at the end, but a couple of them work for computer places, and it had been pointed out to me at Connected Voice, something I hadn't thought of, which is how much energy computers take up, not just your individual one, but how they fit into the internet. I hadn't really thought of that. And when I pointed that out, the two computer people started looking things up and getting figures, and I mean, that wasn't the worst of it. I mean, there was a barrage of anti-Greta stuff came at me. I mean, basically it was aimed at me, but one person used Greta as a, they just made fun of her. I mean, it was actually very unpleasant. So as I say, it's not necessarily going to be that easy. What I'm going to say to them is, this is going to come at you from elsewhere, so you better start thinking about it, because if necessary, I will myself contact the charity commissioners and the FA. But I think probably with people like you, we could work out a strategy to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's what I say to a lot of organisations. It is going to come. I mean, you guys have already been asked, your organisations have already been asked for environmental information from suppliers and customers. So it is already coming, and it is much better to be proactive than reactive. So yeah, it definitely is coming. What about you, Amy and Alice? What would be your barriers to implementing something like this?
I think
probably the warehouse.
Yeah, I was going to say the same.
100% the warehouse.
It's just getting the message across, I think.
Which is why it's got to come from your senior management team.
Yeah. And
filter down. It's got to be a will from them.
I think we just need to focus on the small wins to start with, and then go from there. But when I was talking to Judy the other day about putting together the environmental policy and all the data for the carbon footprint and stuff, she said a lot of it is so easily accessible from her point, like getting all the bills and the readings and stuff like that. So yeah, I think the biggest barrier is probably just getting them to get it.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of the information is there already within all your organisations. An awful lot of organisations are already doing loads. They just haven't got it formalised in a system, and they can't shout about it. So, which is that they're missing a trick there, especially as I say with younger people now, you two included. They want to work for a company that's doing something for the environment and looking after the environment. So, you can attract better employees because of it. So there's, multiple reasons why we all have to do something, and it just makes good business sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we're all in agreement. So has anybody got any questions?
Yes. So if we started saying like, start simple, start recycling, like your paper type of thing. Do we get how do we go about that? Do we get separate bins and then get a separate collection, or what happens there?
So what we'll do is we'll book in some time. I'll come in and we'll go through we'll look at your organisation and we'll go through what would be the biggest impacts initially, and what are your easy wins, and when you get easy wins, it helps bring other people on board. And then the best thing to do is a real mini waste audit, which is just looking through what is how much waste do you produce and what's the main elements of it, what's it made up of. And then when you look at that, then you can look at, right, what are the easy things to pick out of there? We'll definitely look at what's happening with the cardboard side. Because I don't understand why you stopped doing that. But anyway, and we'll look at all that, and we'll look at the easy wins and then implement it. One of the issues a lot of organisations have is when you implement a recycling system, is getting the waste contractor to come and collect it. And often they want you to get quite a big amount before they'll come and get it. But I mean, all of that's doable. We'll look at all of that.
It's not as if we haven't got anywhere to keep some paper for a couple.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So it's not rocket science, and it's all doable. But yeah. So I'll come in and we'll spend an hour and we'll go through what you can do. What are the easy wins? And I would suggest a formal environmental management system because it just helps implement it into everything, into your everyday processes.
Yeah.
But if you didn't want to go down that route, you can still implement an awful lot of the things that you would need to do. You can have an environmental policy, you can have all that sort of thing already implemented. You can look at your waste, and the biggest outputs for you, for your organisation, will be your travel, your energy consumption, and your waste.
Right.
So looking at all those things will give you your biggest outputs. And you, Alice, will be your travel, your energy, your raw materials,
Yeah, I
and
think
waste.
I think we need to have a look at the energy as well that gets used, because there's not one consistent temperature throughout this entire building.
Yeah, yeah. So, but again, I'll come in and spend some time with you. And Emily, I'm be great to book in some time with you as well.
I'm muted. Sorry. Yes, yes. I think again with us, it's the travel, as you know.
Yeah,
For away games, but also fans coming. I imagine the car park they use will probably get an electric thing because it's the council. I'd like to encourage cycling, and also if we could just let people know that there's a bus stops outside. We never let away fans know how easy it is to use that, for example. But and also our suppliers, you know, for all the fan stuff that they buy in the shop, that sort of thing.
yeah. And that could be, that would be.
I mean, one good thing is that one of our sponsors actually has a scheme where they recycle football boots, and we wanted to do that, but we had nowhere to keep stuff. We wanted to do the whole, you know, all sports equipment, but we had nowhere to put it. So that there is a will. The other woman on the on the trustees and I, she's one of the vegans. We push for all these things to do with food and recycling. The guys sort of focus on things like walking football, but we always bring these things up, and we've got a mixture of fans, and a lot of them are really sussed about all of this. So, and we've got a program. We have our social media outlets, and one of the sponsors who they have, actually they're a taxi company, which is interesting. They're very good at putting up posters, so we could have a deluge of posters and possibly even a stall on a match day. So, you know, lots of ideas.
Great. All right. Well, we'll leave it there today, but thank you so much. And I will be in touch. We'll book some appointments in. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank
Lovely.
you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. That's it, I think.